LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 6th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing here. This week I picked out the 12 best, most newsworthy clips from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. I put a link down in the video description to the clip list I'm using, the notes I use for my 12 clips to know what it was I was supposed to say, or at least to try to remind me what I was supposed to say. Hopefully I'll remember to say like 50 to 75% of the things I planned, as I spent 8 to 10 hours today and every day for the last 398 Sundays watching these Sunday morning news analysis shows and picking out the clips and figuring out my commentary and criticism. The topic for tonight's program, well, it's two topics. The main topic, or the title topic, is Trump's Crazy Train. And that's my political comedy clip will be on that topic. And then I will have two newsmaker clips. Two Georgia Republicans who are certifying the election for Biden despite getting attacked by their commander-in-chief, who they voted for and still want to vote for. And anyway, I will cover the Trump Crazy Train topic there, and like I said, with the Saturday Night Live cold open political comedy clip. And then from the ridiculous to the sublime, I guess, the second topic is A Dark Winter is Coming. I guess it's sort of a Game of Thrones reference there, but Biden talked about a dark winter in the debates he had with Trump. Robert Redfield, the director of the CDC, said that the next few months, December 22nd is the first day of winter, right? And going all the way through March 20th, or basically December, January, and February are going to be really, really bad. Robert Redfield, the director of the CDC, says the worst public health event in American history. And by the time I get to the end, I will have a Deborah Birx clip saying it's forget the whole public health part, just the worst event in American history. We're probably going to end up with like at least 500,000 dead Americans. Hate to be a downer, but that's what the clips are going to show. And most of the news clips are devoted to the COVID crisis, with a little bit on how our commander-in-chief is the super spreader-in-chief, not just of the virus at his Georgia rally last night, but also a super spreader of lies about the election. And that was parodied in Saturday Night Live this week, where, although it's the first topic about Trump's crazy train, but because Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has recently been determined to have COVID-19, it kind of bleeds into the A Dark Winter is Coming topic. Kate McKinnon does her impression of Rudy Giuliani, which is kind of weird but kind of compelling. But I've always been a Cecily Strong fan, and she did this impression of Melissa Carone, who's getting her 15 minutes of fame as someone who testified in favor of Trump, someone who worked for Dominion and supposedly had inside knowledge of fraud, but it turns out she also has this weird conviction for disorderly conduct for sending sex tapes of herself and her boyfriend to her boyfriend's ex-wife. And I didn't really want to get into all of that, but I did like Cecily Strong's impression that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch about 40 seconds of the Saturday Night Live cold open. The whole thing is at a link down in the video description if you want to watch it. Here's the part I picked out because I liked, well, that's where I also got my thumbnail, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Excuse me, we are all here under oath. And if you want to talk about random, I voted for Trump, yet Biden won. Maybe a little too random. You aren't even gonna admit that Dominion cheated.
How exactly did Dominion cheat?
Well, for starters, they cheated me out of my cheesy bread.
I think you're confusing Dominion with Domino's.
Either way, my vote took longer than 30 minutes, so it's supposed to be free.
Toots, maybe you want to pull it back a little. I'm worried you're making us look foolish. Safety.
And yes, there were a lot of fart jokes because apparently there's a documented case of Rudy Giuliani farting. I saw before I started the show where people were discussing whether COVID-19 can be spread by farts. And, well, I know that they can track it through the sewage. There's been this great work done in like universities where instead of doing individually testing students, they like test the sewage coming from different dorms, and that's how they figure out where the outbreaks are. So if it can be spread through sewage, I would guess. I don't even know how I got off on this topic, but anyway, you can tell me what you think of Kate McKinnon's Rudy Giuliani, and is it too harsh now that we know that he has COVID and he may be obese? He's definitely, like 78, 70, he's in his late 70s, so he's not in a good risk group for COVID. I don't wish anybody harm, not even Rudy Giuliani or Donald Trump, as you may recall when he got COVID. So anyway, you can let me know what you think of the impressions, the appropriateness of it now that we know Rudy has COVID, and I don't know. What do you think about how I'm actually more of a Cecily Strong fan than a Kate McKinnon fan, even though Kate McKinnon is definitely the bigger Saturday Night Live star? But anyway, now I want to move on to the 5 news summaries from the big 5 corporate news outlets, going from longest to shortest. And NBC News Meet the Press had the longest news summary, possibly the best news summary. I don't want to overanalyze. I mean, it's a little shorter than usual. It's actually very close to the ABC length. But I think Chuck Todd hit, like I said, mostly focused on the COVID cases. Talking about how we're hitting records over and over again. That, I mean, is a way that kind of emphasizes how we are in new territory. Things are worse than they've ever been because every day is, or like the last 5 days are the 5 worst days for deaths and cases. And there's a little bit of the Trump lies on the election sprinkled in that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning. Consider what has happened over the past week. Hospitalizations in the U.S. for COVID-19 exceeded 100,000 for the first time. Daily cases of COVID-19 exceeded 200,000 for the first time, and the second, and the third, and the fourth. The confirmed daily death toll from COVID-19 exceeded 2,000 for the second time, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. This past week, COVID was the leading cause of death in America. If only that were the worst of it. Robert Redfield, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, says December, January, and February will be the most difficult time in the public health history of this nation.
I do think, unfortunately, before we see February, we could be close to 450,000 Americans have died from this virus.
Amid this exploding crisis, President Trump gave what he said was, quote, maybe the most important speech I've ever made. It was not about COVID. It was a 46-minute attack on American democracy. It was filled with debunked claims, false assertions, and outright lies, charging that the Democrats rigged the election to steal his presidency. That the president has chosen to ignore the worst health crisis we've faced in 100 years almost doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that both the good news, the emergence of multiple vaccines, and the bad news, the rising case and death counts, are accelerating. But until those vaccines get here, overworked healthcare workers around the country are fighting a two-pronged battle to save lives and, more importantly, to convince skeptical Americans to finally take this deadly virus seriously.
It's hard to come into work some days knowing that you're short and knowing that you're going to see people die.
We're tired. But we get up and we still do this every day.
Afraid that we're going to get overrun by the sheer volume and the intensity of the sickness of the patients.
We try and celebrate the small victories, but recently feels few and far between.
I have a 4 and an 8-year-old. And they don't run to the door anymore because we don't give hugs when I get home.
You're getting around 400 or 500 calls at some points, maybe even more. And like I said, almost every patient was COVID.
2 weeks ago, we were at red. We were full. We had nowhere to ship people. We were keeping people too long. And literally our doctors were begging regional medical centers to open a bed up because people, they were going to die here.
It's an unfortunately common experience for emergency physicians like me to have encountered patients who just don't believe that this is happening to them.
A lot of people are making a lot of sacrifices to make this work, and so it's aggravating, frustrating for us to have difficulty conveying this, the seriousness of the situation.
We've come a long way, but people are dying still. People are getting sick. And if we just hold it together for a few more months, I really think we're going to win. And
joining me now is the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator. It's Dr. Deborah Birx. Dr. Birx, welcome back.
And you see again, Dr. Deborah Birx is wearing her mask. And if you keep going, like I said, all the way to, that was the first news clip, clip number 2. If you go all the way through clip number 12, that will be a 3.5-minute clip of Deborah Birx, both talking about the mixed messaging coming out of the White House, but also, as I mentioned in my introduction, saying this isn't just the worst public health event in U.S. history. It's going to be like one of the worst events in U.S. history. That's at least according to Deborah Birx and the person who apparently is so worried that she's wearing her mask during her interviews. But like I said, that'll be clip 12. I want to get to the next 4 news summaries. ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Seem to have dropped my clip list again. I think this is it. Yeah. So this talks about how we are experiencing the surge on a surge that I talked about last week. This is George Stephanopoulos with a very scary graph, talking also about how COVID is the #1 killer of Americans, beating out like cancer and heart disease. Yay! That's sort of a dubious honor. Also talking about the vaccine, which you heard Chuck Todd talk about, and then going to a reporter at the FDA specifically talking about the vaccine. So that's sort of the focus of ABC. That makes it a little different from the NBC News summary. There's a little bit about Trump's dishonesty, I believe, which we will see after, which I'll talk about with you after we watch that second news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We saw it coming. We were told it would get worse. Too many ignored the warnings. And now the surge upon a surge is here. COVID-19 is the single biggest killer in the United States this week, surpassing heart disease for the first time. Cases are rising across the country, hospitals under stress. More than 280,000 American lives have been lost to the pandemic. That toll could double before a vaccine is widely available. All eyes on the FDA now, expected to approve the first vaccine for emergency use later this week. White House correspondent Rachel Scott starts us off from the FDA headquarters in Washington. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning. And it is the news Americans are waiting for. And while it will mark a significant turning point, the fight against COVID-19 is far from over.
9 months into this deadly pandemic, we are now headed into what could be the most dangerous period yet.
December and January and February are going to be rough times.
Each week, another grim milestone, another record high. Over 100,000 Americans now hospitalized, roughly 2,000 lost each day.
I put
an ungodly amount of people in body bags that I wasn't prepared to do.
Our greatest hope in these small vials, the UK becoming the first country in the world to approve the Pfizer vaccine. Here at home, an estimated 40 million vaccine doses, enough for 20 million Americans, could be distributed by the end of the year. But first, it will need to be approved by the FDA. The agency meeting Thursday on the Pfizer vaccine, and again a week later on a candidate made by Moderna.
So when EUA decision comes, distribution to the American people becomes immediate within 24 hours. That's our goal.
States already preparing their distribution plans. At the top of the list, healthcare workers and the elderly.
And that is the light at the end of the tunnel.
That's still a very long, dark tunnel. The CDC is projecting up to 329,000 deaths by the day after Christmas. Distribution, a high-stakes operation. And among the biggest challenges, building trust in the vaccine and the process itself in a politicized and polarized time. Just this week, the head of the FDA was summoned to the White House. Amid Trump's frustration, the agency hasn't moved faster.
This is not the Republican vaccine. This is not the Democratic vaccine. This is a vaccine for the world. This is the science vaccine.
I definitely will get vaccinated, and I would recommend that my family gets vaccinated.
Now a campaign emerging from past presidents and the president-elect.
I wouldn't demand to be mandatory. Do everything in my power as the President of the United States to encourage people to do the right thing.
Saying there is so much more to be done.
There is no detailed plan, that we've seen anyway, as to how you get the vaccine out of a container into an injection syringe into somebody's arm.
Joe Biden says he will be urging Americans to wear a face mask for 100 days after he takes office. The president-elect is now preparing to roll out members of his health team. That announcement expected this week, George.
Rachel Scott, thanks very much. Let's bring in the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar. Right now, Secretary.
And I have an Alex Azar clip, not from ABC, but from Fox News. And it's kind of funny because you saw Rachel Scott there say that that Biden's going to roll out members of his health team. And since that report this morning and my broadcast, we found out that Javier Becerra, the Attorney General of California, where I am, he works here in Sacramento. Well, he's not going to be the Attorney General for Biden. He's going to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services in the Biden administration, replacing Alex Azar. So that's some breaking news. I can add to that ABC News news summary from Rachel Scott, which, like I said, was kind of focused on the FDA because that's where she was. And it kind of reminds me of what they do on CBS. And CBS News' Face the Nation news summaries coming up next. They've had Mark Strassman hanging out in Atlanta, Georgia for months and months. If you've been watching my show every week, you know, they explained it one week that every week he knocks on the door of the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, which is in Atlanta. If you're a Walking Dead fan, of course, you know that. Mark Strassman's hanging out in Atlanta, knocking on the door every week. Can I have an interview? Can I have an interview? And he never gets it. That's why he seems to be stuck in Atlanta, or that seems to be kind of, I think he just wants to live in Atlanta. But anyway, this week it worked out because Mark Strassman was in Atlanta when Trump did his rally in Valdosta, Georgia, which he could report on. And so he was really into that. There's some poetic wording. I'm a big fan of alliteration. I guess Mark Strassman's report on Trump's rally includes calling it a festival of falsehoods. I love Festival of Falsehoods. And he also calls it out as a super spreader event, but he also calls out the Democratic hypocrisy that I hear like as apparently the main story on Fox News. If you watch Fox News a lot, that's like they hit it every single day. Gavin Newsom going to the French Laundry dinner, the mayor of Austin telling people not to go on vacation when he was on vacation in Mexico, and there were and the mayor of San Francisco also went to the French Laundry. I don't know what. There's this really high-end restaurant in the Napa Valley called the French Laundry. I don't know why. I've never been there, but apparently it's where all the Democrats go to be hypocrites, and that's the one right-wing talking point that makes it into Mark Strassman's report after Margaret Brennan's introduction here, which I will talk about this news summary with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. The numbers of new COVID-19 infections, new deaths, and new hospitalizations in the U.S. continue to spiral out of control. The coronavirus was the #1 cause of death in the U.S. for the first time last week, surpassing both cancer and heart disease. And the staggering task of deciding who gets the vaccine first, how it will be distributed, as well as when, is underway. We begin this morning with CBS national correspondent Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
Thank you, Saturday night in Georgia, President Trump twisted a Senate runoff rally into a festival of falsehoods.
The swing states that we're all fighting over now, I won them all by a lot.
He claimed, baselessly, dark forces had conspired against a second Trump term in the White House.
We're all deeply disturbed and upset by the lying, cheating, robbing, stealing that's gone on with our elections.
What deeply disturbed health officials, all these rallygoers wearing no masks. Nationally, COVID has surged from crisis to calamity. Expect its peak in mid-January. One American now dies from the virus every 33 seconds.
And then the really sick ones that pass away without family, that sucks a lot.
Friday set a single-day record, 227,000 new cases. For the first time, America's hospitals now treat more than 100,000 COVID patients. In Nevada, patients with the virus occupy 30% of all hospital beds, the country's highest rate. California is running out of ICU beds. This weekend, the state launches regional stay-at-home orders that will last at least 3 weeks.
If we don't act now, our hospital system will be overwhelmed.
Hypocrisy alert. Austin Mayor Steve Adler urging discipline in a COVID surge.
You need to, stay home if you can. This is not the time to relax.
Problem was, he shot this video from his timeshare condo in Cabo San Lucas. President-elect Biden wants all of us to wear masks for the first 100 days of his administration. Could be a tough sell. President Trump insists the election was rigged, and tens of millions of Trump supporters believe him, despite zero proof. Tuesday is the federal deadline for all states to certify their votes ahead of the Electoral College meeting later this month. Every battleground state already has. With change coming in the White House, you can expect a more coordinated national response to COVID from the CDC, rather than the state-by-state patchwork policies over the last 9 months. Margaret?
Mark Strassman, thanks. We want to go now to the chief advisor of the U.S. vaccine effort. That's Operation Warp Speed. Dr. Moncef Slaoui joins us from just outside of Philadelphia.
And as I said, I do have 2 Moncef Slaoui clips coming up. Those are clips 10 and 11. But that was clip 4 there, the third of 5 news summaries. I don't know, at the end there, I watched all of these clips 3 times, basically. First, when I watched the shows. Second, when I capture the clips. And third, I watch it when I'm showing it to you. And that third time, I kind of noticed he seemed to have a little inside info there from the CDC, maybe hanging out in Atlanta. And it was almost like a diss at the Trump administration, because he's saying after the changeover, the CDC is actually going to be able to give leadership to the states, unlike now when the Trump administration is left the states to fend for themselves. Didn't Mark Strassman kind of say that at the end of that last news summary? I just noticed it the third time watching it. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But like I said, my favorite part of that news summary was the Festival of Falsehoods. And speaking of festivals of falsehoods, the next news summary comes from Fox News Sunday, which actually has been kind of in a feud with Trump, although they're still kind of I think, trying to protect the Republican Party. They definitely want Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue to beat Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff in the Georgia Senate race. I actually just watched that Senate debate between Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock, where something was really weird and off with Kelly Loeffler. Like, only parts of her face were working. It was almost like, I almost felt like the artificial intelligence was invading our political system. And, well, that's a whole other topic. Maybe I watched too many Star Trek series, Picard and Discovery, Terminator movies, and I'm just worried that somehow AI is infiltrating our political system. It's no worse than the weird conspiracy theories you're hearing from Trump about how he actually won the election, which gets real short shrift in the Fox News Sunday news summary. Also how Trump is served as kind of a super spreader for COVID-19, although they do talk a lot about COVID-19. Chris Wallace, then Mark Meredith, in the news summary the penultimate news summary before Jake Tapper and CNN's State of the Union. Like I said, going from longest to shortest. Here's Fox News Sunday's news summary. Chris Wallace, Mark Meredith. I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. As we wait for approval and distribution of a COVID vaccine, the news about the pandemic keeps getting worse, threatening to overwhelm the nation's healthcare system. Almost 230,000 new cases just on Friday, more than 100,000 coronavirus patients in the hospital. And public health officials say the next 3 months will get even tougher. But this week may mark the beginning of a turning point. An FDA panel meets to discuss emergency authorization of the Pfizer vaccine, and states are already prepping for distribution. In a moment, we'll speak with HHS Secretary Alex Azar. But we begin with President Trump's return to the campaign trail for the first time since the November election. Mark Meredith has that story from the White House. Mark.
Chris, President Trump appeared thrilled to be back on the trail last night, but his trip to Georgia also exposed the turmoil in the Republican Party over his refusal to concede.
We've never lost an election. We're winning this election.
The presidential election is over, but not according to President Trump. While stumping for GOP candidates David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler,
They believe, both of them, in America, and they believe in our values and all that we stand for, and they understand this state. They love your state.
the president demanded Republican governors reject November's election results.
Your governor could stop it very easily if he knew what the hell he was doing.
Both parties are spending heavily in the fight for Georgia's Senate seats. Republicans need to win at least one of the 2 seats up for grabs to keep their majority. Meantime, nationwide, states are facing a nightmare scenario as COVID-19 cases and deaths reach record levels.
We are at a very critical time right now about being able to maintain the resilience of our healthcare system.
Several states are imposing new lockdown measures to slow the spread, but medical officials insist relief is in sight, with hopes the FDA will approve Pfizer's vaccine candidate, which the company says appears to be 95% effective.
There is also growing optimism up on Capitol Hill that lawmakers will agree to pass a $900 billion stimulus within weeks. The president says he's open to more stimulus, Chris, but he also wants to see what lawmakers produce first. Chris?
Mark Meredith reporting from the White House. Mark, thank you. And joining us now, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar. Mr. Secretary.
And anyway, I kind of pre-criticized that clip there. I mean, there was a little bit about how Trump refuses to concede the election. Not so much about how he's acting as a super spreader of the virus, or about the how most of the Republican Party is enabling his assault on our democracy. But I will have a good clip of Chris Wallace cross-examining Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar. That's clip 9. We just watched clip 5. And that also includes Chris Wallace pointing out that he won't call Vice President Joe Biden the president-elect. So, and also he cross-examines him on how Trump held that super spreader rally in Georgia last night. And that doesn't even count the main topic of the cross-examination, which is how Trump refuses to be a good messenger on masks. He's had real mixed messaging on that, and Chris Wallace does a great job of cross-examining Alex Azar on all of those topics in the clip I will get to in a few minutes. But I have one more news summary, the shortest news summary, Jake Tapper, but Jake Tapper really lays into Trump here. I mean, we're suffering, and that's our, Jake Tapper always says, what's the State of the Union this week? And it's suffering. We're suffering. And he talks about the same statistics of COVID that you saw in all those other reports. He talks about the economic nightmare. He talks about Trump spreading lies and the virus. So it's all compacted into the shortest news summary from Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union this morning over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is suffering. The United States is now in the worst stretch of the pandemic by far, between 2,000 and 3,000 deaths every single day, setting horrible records in number of daily deaths, in hospitalizations, and in new cases. And we have not even started to see the Thanksgiving effect on the numbers yet, as hospitals begin to max out and run out of ICU beds. Medical workers are pleading for leaders to issue new mask mandates and stay-at-home orders. The surge in cases only adding to the economic nightmare, with job growth stalling and leaders now finally teasing a $900 billion stimulus package, months overdue, for millions who may go hungry for the holidays, compounded by a president who only comes out in front of the cameras to spread election lies and grievances, as he did last night at a rally in Georgia. Yet another potential super spreader event, spreading the virus and lies, riling up supporters by falsely claiming he won the state that he actually lost by nearly 12,000 votes, and attacking Georgia's top officials, Republicans, essentially calling on Governor Brian Kemp to overturn the will of the voters. As America waits for vaccines to roll out, the president said he's worked harder in the last 3 weeks than ever before, but that work is to overturn the Democratic election results, sadly, not to call on Americans to wear masks or observe public health measures. If only the president went after the virus the way he is going after democracy. We're going to begin on the surging pandemic, and I want to bring in the chief scientific advisor for one of the Trump administration's legitimate success stories in this pandemic, Operation Warp Speed, to find and distribute a vaccine. Joining us, Dr. Moncef Slaoui. Dr. Slaoui, thanks so much.
And like I said, I have 2 Moncef Slaoui clips coming up. But I don't know. I think Jake Tapper may have condensed it all into the shortest of the news summaries. The attacks on Trump's dishonesty, the spreading of lies, the spreading of the virus, the worst days of the pandemic being upon us. I don't know. Was the shortest news summary the best news summary just because it packs so much of the news into that 1 minute 44 second clip? What do you think? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. Before I get to the newsmaker clips, I did want to thank my super chat contributors so far, Matthew and Lulu Girl. Here, let me show those. I don't know, can you even read that? But I appreciate the people who support my videos through the super chat contributions. And Lulu Girl, I will have a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip already queued up and ready to go for the end of the show. There are also links down in the video description to give direct PayPal contributions, to become one of my monthly patrons on Patreon. There's also a join button down there. As many of my viewers know, I'm going to be reassessing my show as of January 24th, the Sunday after Biden goes from being president-elect to President Joe Biden, the 46th president of the United States, which, despite all the lies and disinformation, is what's going to happen on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. So I will be doing one more live clip roundup after that, and on the Sundays. And I don't know, I've been thinking about doing something on Mondays. Maybe I'll talk about that more in weeks to come. I still have like 7 more. Anyway, I'll do the math later and let you know. But anyway, you saw that a lot of the news clips there focused on the dark winter coming. There's a dark winter coming of COVID. The next few months are going to be horrific. I've been talking about it on my Sunday show for week after week, how things were getting worse and worse. The Thanksgiving travel did not help. Surge upon a surge. You saw all of that. Well, that's the topic I'm going to cover with the last 4 newsmaker clips. But the first 2 newsmaker clips are about Trump's crazy train, about the lies he's telling about how he won all the battleground states. How you saw this clip that went viral from one of the top election officials in Georgia, Gabriel Sterling, who was saying, like, stop it, you're going to get people killed. And that's the clip after next. Is you saw that in the news summary from NBC at least. But this next clip is actually the Secretary of State of the state of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger. He's the guy responsible for counting the votes. And he keeps saying, I wish Trump had won, but, my job is just to count the votes. It's the Republican Party in Georgia who screwed up because they didn't spend enough money. They didn't get enough voters out. And so the guy he voted for didn't win. And that's what George Stephanopoulos is talking to Brad Raffensperger about in the clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
You had the hand audit, you had the machine recounts. The president is trying to make an issue now of what he calls...
Oh, sorry. And it starts off with George Stephanopoulos asking him about one of Trump's favorite talking points. They haven't done the signature match. The signatures don't match. The recounts don't matter. And so, yeah, it starts off with debunking that, and it talks about the threats and how Trump lost Georgia in the clip. Again, I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
You had the hand audit, you had the machine recounts. The president is trying to make an issue now of what he calls signature verification. What's at play there?
Well, I just read Governor Scott Walker said on Facebook that this upcoming election we need to do signature match. We always have been doing signature match. In fact, I strengthened signature match. If you filled out a paper application and that came back with a signature, we matched it then. And then we went ahead, when you send in your ballot, we matched again. And I'm the first Secretary of State to ever stand up an online portal for absentee ballot applications, which connects us with photo ID. And so we've strengthened that. We've also done training with our election officials through the GBI signature match, learning and techniques that they use to verify signatures. So we've strengthened signature match in Georgia. We'll continue to do that, follow the law.
You've got 2 runoff elections coming up in early January for Senate in Georgia. Both those Republican candidates have called for you to be removed from office. Do you still support their candidacy?
Absolutely. I'm a Republican. I vote for Republicans, so I wish them well. The job of the Republican Party is to raise money and turn out the vote. My job as Secretary of State is to make sure we have honest and fair elections. It's as simple as that. And I think in my office, integrity matters.
Do you think because of all these questions about the election, do you think it might make it more difficult for the Republican candidates to prevail in January?
Well, it makes it, these distractions, this disunity, it does make it more difficult. And so the candidates are out there running hard. And I understand there'll be debates today, and I wish them well.
On Thanksgiving, President Trump called you an enemy of the people. What kind of threats have you and your family received since then?
We've had death threats. My wife's had sexualized text and things like that. And now they've actually gone after him. People have been following, some of, young poll workers, election workers in Gwinnett County, and also ours folks that are in one of our offices. And so you're seeing just irrational, angry behavior. It's unpatriotic. People shouldn't be doing that. We had an election. Like I said, I wish my guy would have won. And it looks like he's not. And it looks like he doesn't have enough votes to prevail.
What's your message to Republicans who refuse to accept the election results?
It's one of those situations when you're in an 80% Trump county, you just don't understand. But there are other counties that feel exactly the opposite. And at the end of the day, we as Republicans didn't turn out enough voters. Our office as Secretary of State is really just to look at what those votes totals were, and we report the results. And that's why it gets back to the state party didn't do their job, didn't raise enough money, and didn't turn out enough people.
But there's no doubt in your mind President Trump lost the state of Georgia, lost the election?
Yeah, sad but true. I wish he would have won. I'm a conservative Republican, and I'm disappointed, but those are the results.
Secretary Raffensperger, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, George.
So I don't even know what to make of that guy in some ways, because, it's almost like, thank you, sir, may I have another? He still supports David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler and Donald Trump, even though they're all attacking him just for honestly counting the votes in the presidential election in Georgia. That is some sort of I don't know. I'm not gonna shame someone for their kinks, but that is some weird S&M shit. You tell me what you think about. How do you I don't know why he is supporting and when I watch people say the Republicans who are I support Trump, I support Kelly Loeffler, I support David Perdue, even though they're attacking me. I don't understand it, and I wish that George Stephanopoulos had asked that question more directly, and that's kind of what I was shouting at Chuck Todd when he was talking to Gabriel Sterling, the what is his actual title? He's election implementation manager. What is it? Hold on. Let me see it here. He's Georgia's voting system implementation manager, Gabriel Sterling. And you saw him, he had that viral clip where he said, just stop. And I'm not going to show him talking more about that. I'm going to show Chuck Todd asking him, first, about how if he thinks Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue were blackmailed into attacking him, and he basically says yes, but he's still voting for them. He still supports Trump because they're the lesser evil. That makes no sense to me, but you can let me know what you think after we watch Chuck Todd at least ask the questions that I wanted to ask, why are you still voting for people attacking you over in this clip?
You said something else earlier this week. You said, let's face it, Senator Loeffler and Senator Perdue were forced by President Trump to ask for my boss, Secretary Raffensperger's resignation. The implicit threat was that he would do 2 tweets and torpedo their campaigns. Do you stand by those comments? Do you really believe that Loeffler and Perdue essentially had to do what Trump said?
There's nothing else to make sense, because even their staff were surprised when they put that out. You know, it had been about a week and a half, I guess, since the election had been over. And to say, one of the things they said is that we were not transparent. We were literally doing 2 press conferences a day and sending out hourly press releases on the count. Nobody has any specific allegation. They just want to keep the Trump supporters whipped up because they think that's the best path to win the Senate races. I personally think by doing what I had asked and stepping up and saying, you know, this disinformation has to stop, these potential intimidations and violence has to stop, they would get more votes rather than less. And I'm still supporting it. We have to. I'm a Republican. We need to hold on to the Senate, so I'm still going to vote for them. But I'm not happy with how they conducted themselves in this particular situation.
I was going to ask there. I mean, look, you seem to be somebody that, you know, you want to be viewed as somebody who has the highest ethics, highest integrity, particularly in a position that you're in right now with when it comes to overseeing elections, helping to oversee elections. Do you believe that these folks running as Republicans right now have the same ethical standards that you have?
Well, don't give me an easy question, Chuck. I mean, politics is a complicated profession. I said that earlier this week, too. And the values and the things we have to fight for, sometimes it gets to be complicated and difficult. I said something difficult on Tuesday to people who are in a position of responsibility, who I would hope would show a higher sense of leadership and duty. But at the end of the day, I believe that their opponents would do more damage to this country than they would on this particular front on that particular day.
Yeah. Do you regret your vote for President Trump now?
Well, I can say one thing. I would have been a lot happier if it had been 13,000 votes the other way in this state. My life would have been a lot easier.
But considering how he's behaved, do you ask yourself, maybe he isn't the right person to lead the country, at least if this is what he's going to do to the democracy?
I think that we have this on all sides. That President Trump has a higher sense of responsibility, should be held to a higher standard. But we have a governor candidate in this state who still hasn't succeeded. We have people who, like I said earlier, believe Russians switched votes. I mean, all sides, Republican and Democrat, have to stand up and do a better job, the president included and especially.
Do you believe that the president is doing damage to the Republican Party in Georgia by continuing to stir this pot? Do you think it could cost Loeffler and Perdue their Senate races?
Yes, when he and his lawyers, and then even his former lawyers, some of his former lawyers are literally saying don't vote. It's mismessaging, it's confusing, and if you're telling people don't trust the election system, why would they bother to show up? I mean, the best argument how some people is if you think they're stealing it, show up and vote to make it at least a little bit harder for them to steal.
Gabriel Sterling, who, again, helps to oversee the election system there, working for the Secretary of State. You spoke out pretty hard this week. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective with us, sir.
Thank you, Chuck. I wish I didn't have to do it.
All right. Please stay safe out there.
So what do you think? Is that dude a hero? Or, I mean, he's a hero standing up for, you know, the legitimacy of the vote in Georgia, but he's still supporting Trump. He's still supporting Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, even though they're all attacking him for standing up for the, you know, actual facts of what happened in the vote in Georgia. It's kind of a weird dilemma, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And then this next clip is kind of a transitional clip because it's Alex Azar, the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, talking to Chris Wallace about how Trump has been a really bad leader when it comes to basic health recommendations and wearing a mask. Like in March, no one was sure if it was good or not good to wear a mask, but by April, it was sure. And Trump still gave us mixed messaging, but the reason it's a transitional clip between the Trump crazy train on who won the election and the second topic of a dark winter is coming is because Chris Wallace also, in his follow-up questioning of Alex Azar, mentions why you're calling him Vice President Biden. He's President-elect Biden. So Chris Wallace makes up for the lack of scrutiny in the news summary earlier on Trump's lies on who won the election. And also he talks about Trump's super spreader event in Georgia last night that got short shrift in the news summary earlier, but it's in this newsmaker clip that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Let me ask you, but Secretary Azar, let me ask you about some of those tools. Let's just take the issue of masks. Here's what President-elect Biden said this week.
I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days.
But back on April 3rd, when the CDC director, Dr. Robert Redfield, first recommended that all Americans wear masks, here's what happened, sir.
We know that a face barrier can actually interrupt the number of virus particles that can go from one person to the other.
So it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. They suggest it for a period of time, but this is voluntary. I don't think I'm going to be doing it.
If President Trump had worn a mask then and urged everyone to wear a mask then, back in April, the way Joe Biden is right now, wouldn't we be in much better shape?
Well, Chris, I welcome Vice President Biden to the club. Since the middle of April, the president's guidelines for reopening have called for wearing masks.
President-elect, sir.
The president has called the president has called masks patriotic acts. Every one of his top advisors, we are out there saying wear your mask. We talk about the data. You know, Chris, at 1 meter, if 2 people wear the mask, it can reduce viral transmission by 72%, protecting both the source and the recipient. We've got the data. Masks work. We encourage people, please wear a mask when you can't engage in social distancing.
But first of all, it's the president-elect, Joe Biden, Secretary Azar. And secondly, the fact is the president said on the first day, April 3rd, he wasn't going to wear a mask. He didn't wear a mask in public for 3 months until July. And just last night at that rally in Georgia, not only didn't he wear a mask, but I was watching the rally, thousands of people packed together, none I could see wearing a mask. That is a direct violation of what the CDC and you are recommending.
Chris, our advice is always the same. Wash your hands, watch your distance, wear face coverings when you can't watch your distance, and be especially careful of those settings like overcrowded indoor bars and restaurants or multifamily household gatherings where you're going to let your guard down and take that face covering off. So, Chris, our advice is the same regardless of the setting.
And regardless of whether the president ignores it or not?
Regardless of the setting, our advice remains the same. And the president has called mask wearing patriotic. We encourage people to wear face coverings when they can't maintain their social distance.
Finally, you said this recently about lockdowns. You don't need lockdowns.
So there was some good confrontational cross-examination from Chris Wallace, as I mentioned before. I showed the clip, although he kind of petered out at the end there and let Alex Azar get away with that was some furious talking point usage to avoid the reality of Trump's mixed messaging on mask wearing, and also failing to call Joe Biden the president-elect. So anyway, I talked about all that before I showed that clip. Now I have 2 clips of the director of Project Warp Speed, and I'm a little bit ambivalent about the Trump administration using a Star Trek term to talk about the way they are delivering vaccines. You know, I have here's my Mr. Spock mug that shows how I'm definitely a Star Trek fan, Trekker, Trekkie. I'm both a Trekker and a Trekkie. I know there's a Trekker versus Trekkie feud, and I don't even care about that. I love Star Trek so much that I can mend the feud between the Trekkers and the Trekkies. That's what I'm trying to say. But that has very little to do with these next two clips from the director of Project Warp Speed, other than Warp Speed coming from Star Trek. Moncef Slaoui, in this first clip, he's talking to Jake Tapper over on CNN's State of the Union, and compared to the way Chris Wallace cross-examined Alex Azar in that last clip on mask wearing, this is the most gentle cross-examination, where, Jake Tapper is almost apologizing for pointing out that Moncef Slaoui back in May said that we were going to have hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine by the end of the year, but instead only 40 million. And it turns out why? Manufacturing difficulties, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
I want you to take a listen to how you described your goal when you took this job 6 months ago.
I have very recently seen early data from a clinical trial with a coronavirus vaccine. And these data made me feel even more confident that we will be able to deliver a few 100 million doses of vaccine by the end of 2020.
And that was early data, and you were talking in May. It's December now. We're talking about 40 million doses. Most states are not getting enough in their first shipment to vaccinate the healthcare workers and long-term care residents. In no way at all am I minimizing the amazing accomplishment that you and the people behind Operation Warp Speed have done. In no way at all. But what challenges made that initial goal unachievable?
Frankly, the goal was barely achievable. I described it as it's credible but incredibly challenging to achieve it. The hardest piece in it, frankly, was to identify the vaccines, do the phase 3 trials, and scale up and do the manufacturing. I think the phase 3 trials and the demonstration of efficacy, we've been helped in part, unfortunately, by the strength of the pandemic. There's been so much transmission that the trials completed faster than they would have if we had less disease. On the manufacturing side, it's turned out to be somewhat more complicated and more difficult than we planned. We probably are 6 or 8 weeks later than an ideal scenario where we would have had 100 million doses by the end of this year. But we're not far, and we'll work very hard. One thing I want to emphasize, if I may, which is we are manufacturing here biological products. We're not manufacturing a watch or a little phone. This is not an engineering problem. These are biological problems. They are extremely complex, and we don't control 100% of everything as it happens. There will be small glitches. That's what happens all the time. We have introduced a risk management layer in our communication saying, let's say, if we say we will have 100 million people vaccinated by the end of March or mid-March, maybe we could do that by early March. However, there may be some batches of vaccine that don't make it on time, that are delayed, that are not right, particularly in the beginning, in the next 2 months or 3 months. So we need to be just aware that this is very complex. We're doing the best we can, but this is not mathematics. This is biology.
No one doubting that you're doing the best you can, and no one reasonable doubting the achievement. After you've been vaccinated, let's say I get vaccinated, will I still be able to spread the virus even if I no longer am at risk of serious illness?
We don't know the answer to that very important question. I think, given the level of efficacy achieved, that most people will control the virus to the extent that they will not be infectious to others. But we yet have to demonstrate that. That work, we may have a first answer to it somewhere in February, March, from the trial that we have conducted already, further analysis and some analysis in blood and things like that. But there are also, we're discussing clinical trials where we may be able to assess whether people actually on a daily basis shed virus or stop shedding the virus when they have been immunized and exposed to the infection. And we don't know the answer. We need to remain cautious. We need to remain taking our precautions until a very large majority of the population is immunized. I do think when we get there, 70, 80%, the virus will go down.
And how long do you think immunity from the vaccine will last in somebody's body? Will this be perhaps like a seasonal vaccine, such as a flu shot?
So again, only time will really demonstrate and generate the data for us to know the answer to that question. My opinion, based on science and experience I have, is that this vaccine effectiveness will be long-lasting because one of the hallmark of our immune system is it has memory. It remembers everything we learned. It learned. And when it sees the virus again, it responds to it much, much faster than when it sees it the first time. I think that process of memory is likely to prolong our protection for probably a few years and maybe many, many years. Maybe the most weak people in terms of their health, the very old people, may require a booster every 3 or 5 years, but I don't think this will be a yearly vaccine.
A new Pew Research poll out on Friday.
So there was actually a lot of good information there about vaccines and how long they're going to be effective, etc., in that questioning from Jake Tapper. But, I talked about being a Star Trek fan and my Mr. Spock mug over my left shoulder here earlier, and I can't help but notice that when Moncef Slaoui, the head of Project Warp Speed there, was asked about his vaccine program, he talked about how it wasn't an engineering problem, it was a biological problem. It's not like a cell phone or whatever. It seemed like he was almost doing like that Dr. McCoy thing where I'm a doctor, not an engineer. If you go back and watch that clip, was he doing I'm a doctor, not an engineer meme there from Dr. McCoy? You let me know what you think down in the comments section. But I have one more Dr. Slaoui clip here, and this clip includes something he doesn't give the actual numbers, but it actually includes something that gives me the most worries, the most anxiety about at least the mRNA, the messenger RNA vaccines coming up, which are a platform that is fairly new, and they don't use a live virus or a dead virus. They actually inject this messenger RNA into your bloodstream that causes your cells to create protein. It takes over your cells and tells them to create these proteins that are on the outside of the coronavirus, so then your own immune system reacts to the proteins that your cells have created because of the messenger RNA. And it's a fairly new platform, and one of the things Moncef Slaoui said a few weeks ago in a clip I showed was that we find out the significant side effects within 45 days of the vaccine. 90 to 95% of those side effects are known. But if you're going to vaccinate 300 million people, 5 to 10%, that is a lot of people. And that's also you can see that is sort of the subtext of what Moncef Slaoui says, talking to Margaret Brennan on on CBS News's Face the Nation this morning over here.
Potentially, the first immunization could be taking place.
What are the side effects of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines?
So, very important question. The vaccines have been studied in over 70,000 people, so we have a good understanding on the side effects that take place within the 6 months that we have been studying this vaccine. They are primarily side effects in the injection sites. They last 1 to 2 days. In about 10 or 15% of people, they can have significant, not overwhelming, but significant pain, redness at the injection site that can be treated with Advil or Tylenol, and also a little bit of fever and chills. Those disappear within 24 to 36 hours. There are no serious adverse events associated with these vaccines to the best of our understanding and assessment into the trial period. And we know from the hundreds of thousands of subjects that have been studied with other vaccines over the past 30 or 40 years that most serious adverse events with vaccines happen within, let's say, a month and a half to 2 months after people completed their immunization. We have that observation with these vaccines. There are no such serious side effects. We are confident that in the long term, this vaccine will remain very effective and very safe. The duration of protection overall is not understood yet, simply because we didn't have long enough time to study it.
But I read that you yourself have an 8-year-old child. Vaccines haven't been tested on small children yet. Should parents expect that kids under 12?
And anyway, that was Margaret Brennan's follow-up. Nothing about the side effects that we don't know about in the long term. And that's, I saw people in the live comments saying I'm not understanding, but I've listened very carefully to what Moncef Slaoui said, not only this week, but a few weeks ago, where he said that we know from 50 years of vaccine history that within 45 days we see 90 to 95% of the significant side effects. And so that's why they waited 60 days before they decided that these messenger RNA vaccines are safe. But even if 90 to 95% of, even if they're 90 to 95% safe after 45 days, and then you give it to 330 million people, or whatever, 60 to 80% of the U.S. population, 5 to 10% of that is a large amount of people who, I just keep thinking back to the swine flu in the Ford administration that ended up giving people Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I don't want to be like vaccine skeptic or whatever. I'm just listening to what the dude is saying. Moncef Slaoui didn't actually say 90 to 95% this week, but that's what he said a couple weeks ago, and I'm just doing the math. That's a lot of people who I'm not saying are, necessarily, 100% gonna get some sort of significant side effect. I'm just saying it's possible, even based on what that dude just said. Moncef Slaoui is not saying that, they don't have the time to study the long-term effects because they've only been studying the effects of the vaccine for this virus for 45, 60, whatever days. So anyway, before I finish up, I promised you I guess, the darkest of the a dark winter is coming topic clips. This is Deborah Birx on NBC News's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd first talking about how she's wearing a mask all the time, apparently, because last week I talked about that was another, a dark winter is coming, Game of Thrones reference. Shame, shame, shame. Deborah Birx feels so much shame she has to wear a mask all the time. But Robert Redfield, the director of the CDC, said that, a dark winter is coming. This is the worst public health event in American history. But no, Deborah Birx says not only are we being screwed by the mixed messaging from the White House that Chuck Todd asks about in this final newsmaker clip, but it's basically the worst event in U.S. history, not public health event, just worst event in the final news clip I will talk about with you a little more before the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip that we'll watch together after this clip over here.
Doing that now. Yet the White House and the State Department are throwing indoor parties all this month. I mean, as you know, this mixed messaging that the country's been getting, you say one thing, Dr. Fauci says one thing, and the president does another.
I think it's really important that every single person understands that the way this virus is spread is if you're with anyone indoors without a mask, that's a viral spreading opportunity. If you're outdoors and hugging and kissing individuals, that is a viral spreading opportunity. We have to really understand how contagious, how infectious this virus is. And it's really important at this moment in time that everyone understands also how much virus is out there. There isn't a state without increasing cases right now except Hawaii. So this is where we find ourselves, and we have to listen right now to what we know works, which is masks, physical distancing, washing your hands, but not gathering. You cannot gather without masks in any indoor or close outdoor situation.
I don't mean to belabor this point, and I understand your frustration probably as a public health official being asked about what is happening on the political side of things. But the fact of the matter is, we've been through this for 8 months now, and you have given us all these warnings. And again, the president and others in the administration just flout them. And so do you understand why some in the public then say, well, if he doesn't think it's a big deal, I guess maybe he thinks all the health people they're overdoing it. They're overselling it.
You know, I've heard that personally. When I go out, I just don't meet with healthcare providers and governors and mayors, but I also meet with community. And so I hear community members parroting back those situations, parroting back that masks don't work, parroting back that we should work towards herd immunity, parroting back that gatherings don't result in super spreading events. And I think our job is to constantly say those are myths, they are wrong, and you can see the evidence base. And right now, across the Sun Belt, we have governors and mayors who have cases equivalent to what they had in the summertime, yet aren't putting in the same policies and mitigations that they put in the summer that they know changed the course of this pandemic across the South. So it is frustrating because not only do we know what works, governors and mayors use those tools to stem the tide in the spring and the summer. And this fall-winter surge is combining everything that we saw in the spring with everything that we saw in the summer, plus the fall surge going into a winter surge. I think that's why Dr. Redfield made this absolute appeal to the American people. This is not just the worst public health event. This is the worst event that this country will face, not just from a public health side. Yet, we know what behaviors spread the virus, and we know how to change those behaviors to stop spreading the virus.
What states right now, what governors, talk to them right now.
So I promised you that I would give you a clip of Dr. Deborah Birx, the head of, at least at some point, the head of Trump's coronavirus task force. I guess she was eclipsed by Mike Atlas, who then resigned this week, but the ins and outs are just so aggravating. But you saw there, she said, Robert Redfield saying, I promised you that I would give you a clip where she said, Director of CDC Robert Redfield saying this is the worst public health event in U.S. history. No, just the worst event. Just the worst event in U.S. history. That's the dark winter is coming topic I promised you. It's pretty damn dark. I will be still, however dark it gets, I will be giving you my Sunday live clip roundups for another 7 weeks. That's at least, that will get us through like the darkest before the dawn part of this pandemic, I guess. And I did also promise a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. This is a clip I took, I think in the background you can actually hear Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union. If you listen carefully, you know, some people say that these Dash and Sandy clips are not legitimately part of my Sunday live clip roundup because they're pre-recorded. But no, listen carefully. Jake Tapper is in the background, and it's almost like holding up a copy of today's newspaper. In the final clip, the Dash and Sandy clip, I will finish up the show with you. The Dandy clip to finish the show tonight over here. I don't know, could you hear Jake Tapper? I don't know. I could hear him. Go back, listen again, turn up the volume. You will hear Jake Tapper, CNN State of the Union from this morning. It's just as good as holding up a copy of today's newspaper. But anyway, thank you for all of you who joined me. Oh, and I see I've gotten multiple super chat contributions after the ones I showed. Sana Hayes, Tom Trask, Sexy Bob, Lulu Girl, G Wolf. I appreciate all of you supporting my live stream. You know, the live viewers, the recorded show viewers. Anyway, I am ready to finish the show. Like I said, I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday at least through January 24th, 2021. And until next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you. Oh, thank you, Chris Reiser, for that last-minute super chat contribution. I will be seeing all of you around the internet.